Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today for a virtual version of a vocal recital being presented by myself, Angela Zawada, and Adam Whiting. This concert was originally presented back in March, before the world ended, and at the time we talked to Fran about doing a special performance for the 49ers with some additional expository narration thrown in. So I'm going to make this a little bit more like a lecture format today, and I'm going to explain a little bit about the songs and just a little about myself, my relationship with the songs, and my background throughout the concert. So I hope you enjoy. We'll be starting with a couple of pieces by Handel. So those are my first two pieces by Georg Friedrich Handel. Those pieces sit firmly in the Baroque era of music. So I'm going to talk a little bit throughout the course of the concert today about different styles and movements of music, where they placed in history and how they related a little bit to the other arts, literature, and philosophy. So the Baroque period came out of the Renaissance. The Renaissance came out of the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, whatever you want to call it. And it was sort of a great reawakening of humanism. So after everything, arts, literature, music, philosophy being focused on Christ and religion for about 1,000 years, there was this sort of uprising of a focus on the person again, and the person's place in the world, which we call humanism. This started in like the 15th century, but in music, we don't really see it until about 1600. So the Baroque period is dated 1600 to 1750 in music. One thing that characterized the Baroque period, pardon me, is great contrasts in emotions. And you can see it, for example, in paintings from that period, you'll see something like a scene of frivolity and festivity and drinking and dancing, and then over in the corner you'll see like a skeleton or a skull, something like that, this sort of strong contrasting of life and death, and appreciating the vulgar things of life while we have them. And in this piece, in the second piece that I sang, the Cleopatra, you can see this very strongly. It's in a very common format from the Baroque era. It's an ABA aria. So it begins with recitative, which is kind of like a spoken song where the protagonist, Cleopatra, is explaining the situation a little bit. So this is a story about her and Caesar. Caesar is assumedly dead. Her allies have forsaken her. She explains this a little and then proceeds into the A movement, which is a slow, tender, contemplative movement, which ironically is in major, even though she's singing about crying. Piangerò means I will cry. And then following this is the B movement, which is an enormous shift in style. After sort of bemoaning her fate, she realizes that after she dies, after she has breathed her last breath in her body, she will come back and wreak vengeance upon tyrants, which I really love, especially this week. Sorry. So that is the B movement, which is very fiery, lots of melismas. That's the word for those fast-moving notes that the vocalist is singing. And then she returns to the A movement. And one thing that's really enjoyable about singing this style of piece is that it gives such a depth of meaning to the A movement when you return to it. So typically, it's an exact repeat of the first section with a little bit of ornamentation thrown in. So, you'll do a few extra turns and slides, melismas between notes, just to add a little bit something to it. But more than that, it just expresses the emotion of the piece in a completely different way. So to me, when she returns to the A movement, she's gotten herself all fired up, but then she remembers she's still here, she's still forsaken, her beloved is lost at sea, and it's just this empty desperation the second time around. So that's a little bit about the second Handel piece. I'm going to talk a little more about the first Handel piece after this next set. So next I'm going to be singing one movement from Mozart's motet Exultate Jubilate, which was written in 1793, maybe? 1773, sorry. It was a very early piece of Mozart's. So this piece I read somewhere described as an ABA format, but it's very different than the Handel. So I want you to listen for that. See if you can tell when the A section comes back in. Actually, let me get a drink. Sorry. So did you hear when the A movement came back in, or the A section? It's hard to hear. It's not at all like a Baroque ABA aria. It's not an exact repeat of the first section, especially when you put it in the hands of Mozart. So I don't know if you heard it sneaks in because it's not in the voice part, it's in the piano part. So Adam, can you just play that a little? So it's in the piano part, and it's in the lower register, so it doesn't stand out very much. And that's part of what makes Mozart so delightful to sing. So he was writing during the classical period. So the classical period went from about 1750 to 1830, and it's like an epitome of rationalization, structure. This was when the sonata form became all the rage. So Mozart, I think Haydn too, and Beethoven especially, wrote in the sonata form, which is basically a very structured movement from the dominant to the tonic, tonic to the dominant to the tonic, and a lot of movement through that whole, music through that whole century is characterized by this movement from this sort of at-home feeling in the home key to moving to a related key, but adding a little bit of tension through that, and then back to the home key, and everything is okay. This period in history, like I said, it's called the classical period in music. It came out of the Enlightenment in France and across the world, which was a period where, people were thinking through big problems of society. I mean, think about how America came to be, that basically great minds had been mulling over these ideas of how a society should be set up, what would work best, your different branches of government, how the voting works, the fact that everyone has a vote. And they created something, they crafted something. It was all very esoteric, it was all very sort of in your head. Similarly, the music at this time, like I said, was very sort of structured. But something also that makes it fun is Mozart plays with it. So, for example, another part was when the dominant comes into the piece, which is like halfway through. Can you just play that part a little? We are in the key of C. We started in F, now we're in C, and he is making sure you know it. So stuff like that just really makes Mozart delightful to sing, because it's very structured and yet also really playful. It's like he's playing with the structure that he wrote. A little bit more, so you may have noticed I was using my music for this one. It's not just because I don't know it, it's also performance practice. So this last piece is a religious piece, it's on a religious text, and it's traditional when singing in a church or singing an oratorio or something like that on a religious text to use your music. And just something a little bit about the themes of the time. So Mozart was writing religious music, and plenty of composers, of course, in the Baroque and classical periods and beyond wrote religious music. But there was also, back with that humanism from the Renaissance, there was a rise of secular themes. So again, for 1,000 years, everything, all the arts, literature, music, everything was focused on the church and religious themes. I'm so sorry. Starting with the Renaissance and beyond, secular themes started to be reintroduced. So like the story of Cleopatra is a story out of ancient Rome, or the story of Semele. The very first aria that I sang is a story from mythology about a girl named Semele, who Zeus takes a liking to her and abducts her. I think it might be on her wedding day, carries her up to Mount Olympus for endless pleasure, endless love. So it just, when I first learned this aria, I've known this aria for like 20 years, like someone in grad school sang it. And I always thought it was this very peaceful, very innocent piece, like almost like a lullaby. I mean, the words are, "Oh, sleep." So it seems like that's what it's about, but it's a little racier than that. She's singing it after having spent time with Zeus, and after falling asleep and dreaming of him, and she wakes again and longs to return to his amorous embrace. So this is just another thing that you see flowing throughout the history of music and arts and literature, is this shift between a focus on the vulgar, the human, permissiveness, sexuality, and a focus on constraint and religion and reason. So something that I read compared the Renaissance period to the Romantic period to hippies. So like that kind of like very earthy, in touch with nature, in touch with your body, in touch with humanism. So that was my extended segue into my next set, which is from the Romantic period. So my next set is going to be Frauen lieben und leben by Robert Schumann, written in 1840, which sits securely in the Romantic period.
Selig bin ich da, und sollte mir das
looking for my notes. So when I sang this program back in March, I asked a couple of people if they could tell which was my favorite set. And I was surprised people didn't guess it, but that was it. So, sorry, I literally get choked up when I sing this one. So that set is by Robert Schumann. He wrote it the year that he was engaged to his beloved Clara. And it has a special place for me because I actually speak German. So I lived in Germany as an exchange student for a year after high school, and one of my majors in college was German. So when I'm singing it, it's, almost a native language to me. So I know every word that I'm singing, it has a depth of meaning for me. But I always thought I wasn't allowed to sing it because it's written for a mezzo. So just a little bit about voice parts in classical music. And when I say classical, I don't mean the classical period. I mean, art music. So mezzo-soprano is like a slightly lower register than a soprano. Like most of our altos are mezzo-sopranos. You might find a few true contraltos mixed in there, but mostly I would say altos are mezzo-sopranos. And the highest part is soprano. So I've always sung soprano, although I've had a lot of teachers question if maybe I actually am a mezzo. But I've always billed myself as a soprano, so here I am. And especially when you're in school, there's this whole hubbub about what you can and cannot sing and what's right for your voice and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not in school anymore, so I'm going to sing the set that I like. So I love the piece because it's in German, and it's from the point of view of a woman, which is really hard to find in a lot of art and literature and music up until, 1950s maybe. So it's written by a man, but it's from the point of view of a woman. And it's just the title just means woman's life and love. And that's all it is. It's the story of how she meets someone, admires him from afar, they start dating, they get married, they have a baby, and then the last movement is he's died, he's passed away. I left a couple of movements out of this piece just for brevity. I think I left out the third, sorry, yes, I should have prepped this. I left out the third and sixth? 3, 5, and 6. Thank you, Adam. So those are mostly, like the third one is about her, like the dating phase, like when they start dating and getting to know each other. 5 is her excited to get married, and she's like, oh, help me get dressed. 6 is a lovely piece, and I thought about adding that one back in, actually. That's when she tells her husband that she's expecting. And it also has some musical phrases in it that resonate throughout the entire piece. So that one I thought about sneaking back in. But anyway, that actually, speaking of the musical phrases, that was one thing I wanted to draw everyone's attention to. So the form, that constraint and form and structure of the classical period starts to loosen up again in the Romantic period. But I think one thing that composers did to continue to give their pieces continuity was use things called leitmotifs. So leitmotif is actually a very technical term, like Wagner is the one, I think, who kind of started it. But it kind of just, in a general sense, it means having a little snippet of a phrase, a chord, a note, something that brings back the memory of something earlier in the piece. It means that that little snippet is tied to a specific emotion or a specific character. And every time it appears throughout the piece, it has a different meaning. So, for example, in this piece, Adam, do you want to play the beginning? that's the very start of the piece, and then listen to the postlude for a few measures. Sound familiar? He takes almost verbatim the start of the piece and sets it at the end of the piece. So since this is about a woman's life, to me what this symbolizes, in the first piece, she's full of this sort of breathless adoration and excitement, like she's just met the guy. And it's like she sees him across a room and she's like, and she gets that little flutter in her belly every time she sees him. That's what I hear in that dum, 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 dum. And then at the end, he's passed away and she's standing there before his grave, and he was everything to her, her whole world. Sorry. And now that same figure, to me, sounds like sobs. So now it's like, again, she's sort of catching her breath, but it's a completely different meaning. So just a little bit about Schumann and the Romantic period and what they did to continue evolving musical structure. The next pieces I'm going to be singing are 2 by Fauré in French and then 2 by English. So I'm going to sing the Fauré and then say a few words, and then we'll wrap up the concert. So, a new era. Actually, I think Fauré is still considered romantic. I think he's like late romantic, moving into the 20th century. So, just I happened to be doing a little research for this, and I found a quote comparing Schumann's and Fauré's music. So I thought I would read that because it seems appropriate. This is Fritz Nosk's French song from Berlioz to Duparc. He says, Schumann's nervous spirit, his rapture and his exaltation are opposed to Fauré's caution, equilibrium, and elegance. The old conflict between romantic and classic is once more apparent. So interestingly, he calls Fauré more classical than romantic, which I can kind of see. So he's later in time and he starts playing with the tonalities, but he also was very versed in the classics. And I mean like way classics, like ancient Greek modal tones. And I think he really focused on that kind of clean structure and playing with those sorts of things. Although that last piece, I mean, like talk about rapture and exaltation and all of the hoopla and fireworks. So perhaps not typically Fauré. So a couple of things. So when we're moving into, like I said, the sonata form, the structure of classicism is sort of being washed away in a new compositional style. And one thing Fauré did, you can hear how like the texture of the music gets much more dense, frankly more modern sounding to our ears as we go through time. So something Fauré did a lot of was seventh chords. So a triad, and I'm sorry, I'm throwing a lot of musical terms in this. I hope some of you appreciate it, and those who don't, you can just skip ahead. A triad is just bum, bum, bum. Oh, thank you. Bum, bum, bum. And you add a seventh. It gets a little jazzy. So Fauré did, and a ninth. He liked ninths too. So something that Fauré did a lot in his music and that gives it that dense sort of texture is a lot of these dense chords with like just a lot of extra notes thrown in. So I was going to ask Adam to play just the beginning of the first piece, Après un rêve, to hear how those sevenths also act as suspensions, another musical term. A suspension is when you have a note that doesn't fit in the chord resolving down to something that does. So if you want to just... and everyone goes, ah. So can you just play this? Yeah. It's just heavenly. It's just this very sort of ethereal sound. You know, you look at a piece by Mozart and you can literally see the gaps between the notes. There's a lot of thirds, you know, and fifths and open chords, but something like this, it's dense and mushy and ethereal. It's like there's clouds swimming around. So just a little bit about how that's changing. And then now the last piece in Fleur Jetée. So sometimes at the beginnings of pieces, they'll write the range. They'll notate the range for the singer. Now this piece is in F minor. Here's some more musical stuff. It's in, thank you, F minor. The, what do they call it? The harmonic equivalent is A flat major. So yes, 4 flats, yes. A flat being one of them. And when I started this piece, it says that it goes up to an A natural. And I was like, how is he going to get to an A natural from a piece that's native note is A flat? I thought maybe he was going to do a modulation, another musical term. So a modulation is like you kind of build a little tension and excitement in a piece by having it go up a half step like every time you repeat it. So, like, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Amazing grace. You just keep going up a half stop, which to me is actually kind of a hackneyed technique for getting tension into a piece. It's kind of cheating. So let's listen to how Fauré does it. Yes. So it's like I wrote down, I tried to do the chord analysis. It moves from C minor 7 to E flat minor 7 to A diminished 7 to A major. That's how we get to A. Then it moves back through C sharp minor to C minor, ninth to F minor. So it's just, it's just the structure of the music has come a long way, I think, since Mozart. Composers started going places that they never dreamed to go before. So that's just a little bit about how music is progressing through the era. The last two pieces I'm going to be singing today are by Samuel Barber, who's an American 20th century composer. So the 20th century, I'm reading a book on philosophy right now, and he says that after Romanticism, you can't really like qualify periods anymore. Like up until then, you had these sort of groupings, like I said, art, literature, philosophy, music. You had a chunk called Renaissance, a chunk called Baroque, a chunk called Classical or Enlightenment, a chunk called Romanticism. After that, it kind of all shoots in different directions. I mean, you can see it in art in the 20th century too. Like they just started playing with like the textures of paint, or having large blocks of color next to each other and just letting the human mind wander and figure out what they see in that. So they were doing similar things in music. They started playing with like the timbre of sounds. Like Schoenberg came up with a new tone structure so that we were no longer using the tonic, dominant tonic. You had composers doing things like playing on the strings in a piano, just like messing with stuff, trying to hear, find different things in music. Samuel Barber, as far as I know, was not one of these composers. His music he's a little more like Fauré, in the sense that he's like a classicist. He sort of goes back to the old traditions, and his songs are very singable, lovely melodies. So the first one I'm going to sing is Music When Soft Voices Die. And if you were online for the church service this past Sunday, you would have seen me singing a setting of Music When Soft Voices Die, which is a poem by Percy Shelley. The lyrics go, music when soft voices die, vibrates in the memory, odors when sweet violets sicken, live within the sense they quicken. Rose leaves when the rose is dead are heaped for the beloved's bed, and so thy thoughts when thou art gone, love itself shall slumber on. So when I hear this poem, the last line stands out to me, love itself shall slumber on. Every other phrase of the poem is about things having a season, things coming and going. They're here, then they're gone, but we remember them. They linger in some way. Even our thoughts, we write things in a journal or a book or a letter, and those things linger on. But love is the only one that slumbers. So when something slumbers, there's a sense of it someday reawakening. It's different than lingering, it's slumbering, which to me says that we'll be reunited in the afterlife. That's the way I read this poem. So I actually like the quilter setting better because he takes that last phrase and he sets it apart. Whereas in the barber, it's actually just part of a descending line, which you're going to hear when I sing it in a minute. But it's still a beautiful poem, and I had started with barber, so I stuck with barbers. This last piece I'll be singing today is called Sure on This Shining Night by Samuel Barber. And this piece actually is kind of how this whole recital started. So I called it Nocturne because I was noticing these sort of themes of night and darkness and dreams here and there throughout the song. So that's what I chose as an overall theme. But the piece, I think the recital grew out of this single piece. Mostly because Richard, my voice teacher, Richard Anderson, the soloist here, it's one of his favorite pieces. So he had me working on it, I don't know, 5 years ago, whenever I started taking lessons with him. And it's just a lovely, heavenly piece, like the way the piano and the vocalist interact, the way you get a sense of the mood of place. You can almost see the setting in your mind when you listen to the music. So I think I'm going to go ahead and sing now.